Good evening. I am Dr. Gregory Salters, and I'm back with you again as a law enforcement executive and a success and leadership coach. Hopefully, everybody is doing well, your families are doing well, and we are dealing with everything that's happening with this election season. We've watched the debates, we see what's happening in our communities, and we're looking at things saying, wow, what are we doing with law enforcement? We still need strong law enforcement officers that are out here serving our community, doing what we do best as public servants. Before on one of our talks, I dealt with what we do before the application. How do you prepare yourself? What do you do to get ready to turn in that application? Tonight, we're going to talk about the actual application. Because how many times have you looked out there? A lot of times when you're filling out jobs and you go in and you might put your application in and you sit there and you're like, okay, they can figure out the rest of the stuff. One of the things I want us to understand within law enforcement, the law enforcement application sets up everything in your law enforcement career. Things that you possibly didn't even consider are going to be taken into consideration based on what you put on your application. And what we're looking at with the application process, I want you to definitely take a look at and review where you are in geographically. You also need to look and see what level of law enforcement are you applying to. Are you applying to city, county, state, or federal law enforcement organizations? While their processes and their applications may be slightly different, what we will be discussing here tonight is going to be applicable to any of those applications because we really look at these applications in law enforcement, I would say, a lot different than other professions. You may have grown up and gone and filled out a job application where you basically put your name, driver's license, social security number on there, and you kind of guessed at some of the information regarding what your job history was or where you lived. And you basically signed it and figured that they would figure out the rest of it as you go along the process. That could cause you to be your worst enemy in law enforcement because that information, as we do your background check, we do your polygraph exams, if that information does not turn out to be accurate, that could definitely create some hurdles in your process. So as we talk tonight, what I want to do is make sure we have a conversation, make sure we address some issues, and make sure we're here, we're doing what we need to do so that you don't become your own worst enemy when you are completing your law enforcement job application. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and move forward. Tamika West, glad you're joining us. If you have other friends, be sure to share this with them. You can share this with them. We're on Facebook. We're on my personal page. We're on my professional page. And we're also streaming live on YouTube. So if you're over on YouTube or you have friends that are not on social media, connect them to my YouTube channel, Dr. Gregory_Salters, so they can get this information even though they are not on social media. Let's go ahead and have a nice talk here about the application process. First, when you look at this job application in law enforcement, do not, let me repeat, do not look at it lightly. Do not fill out your application in a hurry and leave information off. We can start out just starting at the top of the applications. You know they're going to ask you for your name. They're going to ask you, and when you put out your name there, this is very important. Sometimes you may have changed your name legally. Make sure you're using your legal name. You also make sure you're using your full name. Many times individuals will be using partial names that they may have grown up with and switch names. Make sure you fill out and put your real legal name. And if you have any other names, be sure to indicate them on your application. What you don't want to happen is you fill out the application, you're going through the background process, they run your credit or they do some checks and find out you had some other names that you have used. It might not stop your process, but it can create a hurdle in your process. And in the job application in law enforcement, if it is coming up in your mind, it is better to include it in the application. When we grew up, some other times, if you didn't know the information, like, I don't know, you leave it out. It is just the opposite when you're completing a law enforcement job application. When in doubt, put it on the application. Therefore, no one can ever say that you omitted, did not supply the needed information. Put it on the application. If you need to explain it, do so. When you're dealing with your social security numbers and this type stuff, make sure they're on there. Oh, I just remembered one thing. When you are completing your law enforcement application and they start asking about your arrest or anything like that, they are referring to any arrest. Sealed cases and expungements do not count when applying to a law enforcement job. They must be disclosed. Your lawyers may have told you they were sealed and that, but they are not sealed when you are applying for law enforcement jobs. So you need to put that information on there. Trust me, that can create some hurdles if you state that you've never been arrested, and it could have been while you were a juvenile. You could have been arrested when you were 10 years old and the case was sealed. You need to discuss that with your family before you put in so that you make sure you didn't forget anything. And if that's there, make sure it's included on the application. Also, when they ask you for your residence address and they're asking you for that for this time, where you live now, and a history of your addresses. The reason that they're asking for those addresses is that when we do background searches, we go out to your neighborhoods. We may contact those local jurisdictions to find out if there was anything that went on in that neighborhood while you were there that you may or may not have been involved in. We're also going to be using that to go over and talk with your neighbors to see if, in fact, they can provide any information that will help us in our background search dealing with you. So make sure you have that, because what also happens is if you do not put that information down there and we find that address when we do a credit history and they have you listed at a certain address, or we talk to your colleges and they have a different address when you were in college or something like that, then sometimes the investigator may dig a little further and wonder, why didn't you include that? It may turn out that you just simply forgot about the address, or in some instances, we found out where individuals were involved in some type of activity that they thought would cause them some hurdles in becoming a law enforcement officer. So they omitted that information. Many times it's not what you did that will cause you hurdles in the law enforcement application. It's how you disclose it or your lack of disclosure that creates problems. So tell us what it is. And most times we can deal with things that are in your background, provided they're not on the list of things that we clearly will not hire for. Now, when you're moving down from your addresses, they're going to ask you possibly about the individuals that live with you and live in your house. This gets to be an interesting portion because sometimes individuals, we may have people in our family, our immediate family, that do the things that they have done. They are not eligible to be working in the law enforcement profession. That has little to no bearing on your ability to be in law enforcement. So when you're listing those things, please be honest, please be open, please be as complete and accurate as you can be on this application, because sometimes that can create issues when you don't mention that your brother may have been arrested for something, or your sister may have been arrested, or parents, or all of them, and you're listing things down there and you omit them. Then the question begins to be, what else did you omit? And you do not want to create that issue, because as you see right now in law enforcement throughout the country, throughout the world, the integrity and your ethics is what really comes into play. So when you are applying, make sure you're being as completely open and honest as possible. Good evening, Nadia. I see when you applied over at the police department, you say no stone was unturned, huh? Everything was there. So things were there. And this is what they did when they were doing the history on you. So as you state, even reach back to your school in Haiti, and you've been in the US for years. But these are things that people do when they're out there and you're putting in that application. We will be looking in your background to find out what's there that we need to know so that we can make a sound decision when making you an offer or deciding that we have better qualified applicants. Thank you for joining in with us. The other thing that we're looking at is, after you listing the people that are in your house, let's look at your job history. When you're listing your job history, please, let me say it one more time. Please be accurate. Because what happens is if you're listing jobs and you're listing employers, let's think about it. Go back as far as you can. Sometimes they have it for the last 10 years. Same thing with your residence. Sometimes they will ask you for the last 10 years, what addresses have you lived, or they'll put a time frame on it. Make sure you complete that address and you give those histories as far back and covers the time span that they say covered. Because if you do not do that, the background investigator and the agency could also look at it and be, wow, this individual is having a hard time following directions. So what is it that we need to do to help them to follow directions? So that's what we also need to do. How do we do it? Make sure you're complete. Make sure you are accurate. If they say 10 years, give 10 years of your residential history. Even if you moved every month, give everything that you can, go back, try to find it. And if you cannot find something specifically, write a note stating that you tried to find it, but you were unable to locate it, and include that in there. Now getting down to your employment history, same thing. Be as complete and accurate as you can. Provide the contact information for the managers and the jobs that you may have had. And sometimes you may have worked for someone as a individual. You might not, it might not have been a formal company. You might have worked for a neighbor doing consulting. List it. You may have done babysitting. List it. You may have cut grass when you were younger. List it. And all of this depends on how old you are when you are applying. If you're applying to be and work in a law enforcement capacity, and this goes for any law enforcement capacity, it doesn't matter where you're applying for a sworn position, or as Nadia was a non-sworn executive assistant, administrative assistant. So you still had the same background because you're in the same building. So now when you're applying, you need to be as accurate as you can. Make sure this information is there. So now when you're putting down your employers and who you've worked for, like I was stating, it depends on how old you are. So if you are applying when you're 21 years old, you may have jobs that you did while you were in high school. But you're also thinking about, how are these jobs going to show that you are the best qualified applicant here at the police department and within law enforcement? And a lot of times your diverse experience and diverse jobs should be looked upon as a strength for you. When I work with clients and we talk about it, we say, don't think you had a whole bunch of jobs. We think that we had a lot of experiences that will make you able to connect better with the public who has a lot of different experiences. So you list those jobs and go back. So sometimes they have those listed for as far back, maybe the last 10, 15 years that they may ask for your employment history. Go back and give that to them. Also, when you are writing in the job description, be sure you write that job description and show what it is that you did in those particular jobs. And also you may want to add how that will help you be the prime candidate for a law enforcement position, whether it is an officer or whether it's a sworn position or a civilian position. So if you worked at a grocery store, you can state that working there in the grocery store, you basically helped clean the aisles and make sure that the aisles were in order. And it also worked with various diverse individuals that came in. They were able to help them get what they needed and get out as quickly as possible, and made them feel warm, and you connected with them. Think about it. Isn't that what we need in law enforcement? Individuals that can deal with a diverse population, individuals that can connect with the individuals that make people feel warm, and we do our job. We got Wayne Boyer with us this night. He is over there and in charge at the Broward County Institute of Public Safety. He's the one that's in charge of getting our officers trained. So I greatly appreciate you joining us again tonight, Wayne, because this information you stated, and you've probably seen out there at the academy, many people have missed some opportunities merely because they did not fill out their application as strongly as they could fill it out. So we want to make sure, if you're going and you wanted to be an officer, do not be your own worst enemy by not completing the application completely and thoroughly. So now we're down and we're talking about the things that we're looking at after the employment. Look at these employment things that you've done. Put down their list of things that you've done. Describe what you've done so that therefore we can see in law enforcement why you would be an outstanding team member for us. The next section that we get down to, they might ask you if you have ever been in an accident. This is one that I see has caused individuals numerous issues, because when you're talking about an accident, people may say, I was in the parking lot, someone hit my car, nobody called the police. The question wasn't how many times did you make contact with another car and the police were called. The question was, how many accidents have you been in? So remember, as I stated, when in doubt about something, include it in the application. So you would write down, here's something that happened September 30th, 2020. I was in the parking lot of the mall. Another car backed into me. There was minor damage and no cops were called. Because if you leave that out and we find out that someone submitted a claim or this was it, now again, we begin to wonder, what else have you left out? So we want to make sure this is what's happening. So now, I want to look at it and we say, what about, that's the accident portion. And this also talks about tickets. Many times they will ask you, how many tickets have you had? And what you need to do is go back and review all of your tickets, all of your citations, parking, moving citations, and list those. Yes, your driver's license your driving history may not even list all of them for whatever reason. Now imagine this, you go in and you pull your driver's license history. You know that you received 7 tickets. You pull your driving history and it shows 6. So you think, wow, the agency is going to say 6. So therefore you're going to say 6 like your driving history says. And then you know that you have that 7th one. So now when you get in and you're going through your background process, so on and so forth, then we find out that there is a 7th one and there was a glitch in the system for whatever reason. Now, once again, you've created a hurdle because you knew you had 7. You could have easily put down 7 and stated that when you pulled your history, it only showed 6, but you have 7. That would have been one less hurdle. Again, do not be your own worst enemy when you're dealing with this. And when we're talking about these situations, it's very interesting because what I should definitely make sure you are aware of is that all organizations have their hiring standards. They are published. So you may wish to get with the agencies that you're going to apply with and find out what their hiring standards are. What's their age? What's their educational requirements? What are the things that you're needing to do? That's what we talked about in my previous segment when we talked about what to do prior to the application. So also when you're in there, sometimes they may even have a section that tells you how many tickets or how many points are the max that you can have before being disqualified in their process. They'll also have their drug standards to find out what drugs will get you disqualified from being in their process. You need to know all of these things prior to submitting an application, because then you save yourself time and save the agency time if there are things in your background that will clearly cause you to not meet their minimum hiring standards. So now we've talked about your name, we've talked about the address, we've talked about the people that live in your house, we've talked about your job history, we've talked about your tickets. Now when we're talking about the drug history, this is kind of interesting because things have changed over time, because the standards have changed just because things have changed in society. And so now when I started in 1993, some of the things that would have you immediately disqualified now will not have you immediately disqualified currently. So what you have to do is find out what those things are, come through and make sure your application indicates what you've actually done. Some of the ones that have been kind of humorous to me are when we've asked them questions such as marijuana use. And some individuals may say, yes, I've smoked marijuana 2 or 3 times. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but they'll tell us 2 or 3 times in the job application. But then when we get down to the background investigation and the polygraph exam, and they're asking the questions and going over them and making sure everything is accurate, they will ask you, how many times did you smoke? And you'll say it was 2 to 3 times. And they'll say, okay, tell me about those 2 or 3 times. And you might say those 2 or 3 times, one time was when I was at a party in the Caribbean and the party lasted 24 hours. So during that one time, I may have smoked marijuana continuously. So I may have had 30 or 40 joints, but that was still just one time. Well, that's not the intent of the question. The intent of the question is to ask you, how many times have you spoken or had these incidents? So that's why we have the background process and the polygraph process, so that we can make sure we're all saying things and understanding what individuals have done. I've also been in situations where people have asked about the polygraph, and they talk about it. The way that we do the polygraph is you take information that's been provided during the application process, and you ask those same questions dealing with the polygraph to determine if, in fact, the individual has a reaction to the questions, which could mean that they are keeping something from us, something in that particular question cause them to remember something, and it's used as an investigatory tool that says that, okay, we might need to ask a little bit more questions in this area. And people call it a lie detector, but it's not really a lie detector. It just determines your reaction to various questions. So that's why we need to make sure that your application is complete, and is complete as accurate. So if, in fact, you have smoked marijuana, and you smoked marijuana 5 times, and you can definitely say 5 times, then leave 5. But if you smoked and you're like, man, it was 5, maybe 7, but no more than 10, write down 10. So therefore, we're dealing with the 10. We haven't had more than that. So therefore, as you're going through the process and you're going through the backgrounds, you have not created yourself and made yourself your own worst enemy when going through this process. So now that we've talked about the drugs, we've talked about that, we've talked about accidents, we've talked about your driving history, let's talk about your references. When you are considering individuals that would be a reference for you, this is what we do. Normally, individuals will not provide a reference name of someone that will give them a bad reference. So we understand human nature means you will give someone's name that you know that will speak highly of you. So sometimes what we do during our process in this application, you have provided individuals. So what we'll do is say, thank you for providing Nadia Assad as a reference, or thank you for providing Wayne Boyer as a reference, or Jenny Thelwell as a TEP reference, or Tamika West as a reference. What we will then do is we will contact them. We'll say, okay, Nadia, who is someone that you could recommend that could tell us some more about the individual? And then let's suppose we go over and we talk to Mr. Wayne Boyer, and we say, okay, tell us what you know about him. When you met him or you saw him as you all were growing up, who were his 3 closest friends? Then Wayne may tell us 3 individuals that were my closest friends. So therefore, the background investigator will then contact those individuals. Now, those individuals can confirm what the background investigator has found out about you and your character and activities, or sometimes they may find out other things. So don't think that when you provide the references, they are the only individuals that we will be speaking with. Many times we speak with them and get further references as to who else we should contact. Also, when you were looking at, before I told you, make sure that you check your credit history, because your credit is also something that's taken into consideration when determining how qualified our candidates are and if they meet our minimum qualifications. So now let's suppose you have had some issues with your credit. You may wish to run your credit. You may wish to talk with individuals at the agencies at which you're going to apply and ask what kind of credit standards they have. And if you have things in your credit that you need to clear up, perhaps it could be writing letters and getting the things removed from your credit history, or it could be setting up payment plans to get things taken care of. So all kind of options that you may have to address that credit issue. I would suggest you do that prior to submitting your application, so therefore it will not be a hurdle in your application process. Many times individuals have gone through, and because they hadn't pulled their credit, they're going through the application process. They get over there. You talk about your car loans. You talk about any foreclosures or any other financial issues you may have had, and you leave things out. If you just would have been proactive, pulled your own credit, you would have been able to answer those questions better and not be your own worst enemy during this process. Then the other thing, as you're going down and you have completed your entire application, make sure that the application represents you, because sometimes you'll have an opportunity to type the application in a Word document. Sometimes the documents may be printed out and you'll be looking to handwrite the documents. Different organizations have different standards. Some say they want them written, some say they want them typed, some want them word processed, some want them uploaded. Make sure that when you present your application, it is the best looking application that you can possibly have. If you have it and it is over there on the Word and it's there, make sure you use spell check, because that is an indication on your thoroughness. It's amazing if you're using Word and you're typing your document up there, the little squiggly lines are not decoration. The little squiggly lines mean there's something going on that you need to address. So when you're doing it, make sure you have that with you. Also, you will notice that in many applications, they'll say just submit your application and then you move forward and you have everything there. Many times it will not hurt to put in a cover letter. Perhaps it will not hurt to include your resume. Some of these things that you're asking and putting up there, you can do. They tell you what the minimum is, but this is what you're trying to do to move forward. When I work with individuals that are applying for jobs and I'm coaching them through things, I ask them, what do you think the purpose of the application is? What do you think the purpose of the hiring process is? The purpose of the hiring process is for you to show us why you are the best qualified applicant that we have. Do not be your own worst enemy by submitting a sloppy, inaccurate, not thorough application. Because even if you come back and apply again, you only have one opportunity to make a first impression. So when we're filling out our applications, also the back of the application says they need your signature and it also needs to be notarized. So you need to make sure you signed it and you notarized it. Also remember, you may wish to fill out the application, put it to the side, take a break, come back, review it again from yourself. Start going line by line. Do not leave any blanks in the application. If there's something there that does not apply to you, either draw a line through it or put the letters in A, which mean not applicable. So if it's not applicable, put not applicable. If the answer is none, put none. I hate looking at applications where individuals have left something blank that they meant to go back and complete it. So now you think about it. Would that not create a hurdle? Because if you're leaving blanks on your job application, will you not leave blanks in your police report? Will you not leave blanks in your reports that you submit? If you're an executive assistant, an admin aide, would you now have incomplete work? So am I looking for individuals that are capable of following directions, completing a complete application, and making themselves look good? Increase your chances of being hired by making sure the application represents you when we look at it. Do not submit a sloppy application, because that is an indication of you. You're now beginning to set the tone of how the organization will look at you. Make sure you have your application complete. Make sure you look at it. After you have looked at it again, have someone else look at the application. Have them look at it. Have them review it. Cross all T's, dot all I's. Look at your dates. Make sure your dates flow together. Make sure you have all of your histories in there. Make sure you have it. What you don't want to do is slow your process down, where the background investigators need to contact you to get additional information. Because if they need to contact you to get additional information, that could be the difference between you getting hired and not getting hired. Let's suppose that you have an application and it looks very well. They're wanting to hire you, but it's not complete. Your competitor doesn't look as good as you on paper, but they're trying to decide between 1 and 2. They have one last spot to hire someone before the COVID or any of the other budget cuts come into play. So the other person has a complete thorough application. So therefore, that investigator is able to put together their packet, put together everything before your investigator can, because you left out things that are needing clarification. So due to your lack of thoroughness and due to you not presenting the best possible application, the other packet is presented before yours. The other person gets the job, and now all vacancies have been filled because you were your own worst enemy and did not complete the application as completely and thoroughly as you possibly could. Do we have any other questions or comments? I want to just find out if we're addressing some of the issues, because these are the things that we really need to make sure we do. I don't want to miss having an outstanding team member because their application was not completed thoroughly and completely. So as I've stated before, I am Dr. Gregory A. Salters. Please connect with me, follow me. We have the YouTube channel, Dr. Gregory_Salters. Comment here, send your friends here. We're trying to make sure that this outstanding profession has the outstanding individuals in it that we need. We do not need to lose outstanding individuals because their application just was not completed as well as it could. So if you're in law enforcement and you're like me, we know we can review some of these applications when individuals are looking to turn them in, so that we can make sure that they're doing what they need to do to move forward in our process. On upcoming lessons, we'll be talking about some of the things that have created some issues for individuals. We can demystify the polygraph. We can go over and we can talk about anything that you wish to talk about. We'll talk about what do you wear to the interview. We can talk about those things and how do you prepare for them. This is what we're looking for. Okay, Wanda Faye Burns, how are you doing this evening? Thank you for joining us. So your daughter has applied for BSO CPI position and never got a reply. Despite having a master's in child protective investigation, she's currently a CPI in another county. I definitely will share this information with her. Definitely. And you can also have your daughter reach out to me directly. We can talk. She can DM me. I think you may have my cell number. We can make things happen. We want to make sure that we get outstanding people like your daughter into the profession so that we can definitely move our profession forward. We need talented individuals here everywhere on our team. So thanks again. I am Dr. Gregory A. Salters, and you all have been seasoned for success.